Hello, thanks for watching. I'm Christopher Julian. Friends call me CB. Welcome to the Sunroom. I want to shine some light on important facts I think all Americans need to become familiar with. The people, your planet, they need your patriotic help. I need your attention. We're living in dystopia, buried deep in lies. Politicians, universities, media, even your cousin Vinny, they're all spreading propaganda, and you're being deceived. I don't believe we can save humanity or planet Earth if we don't educate people to some serious facts, truths no one is teaching or explaining that I know anything about. Understand the facts, you'll understand how I can say you're being lied to. Do yourself, the planet, humanity, and its future survival a favor. Let me explain what's happened to America and your government with this set of facts. I believe you must know this set of facts to honestly claim your patriotism. I want you to know and understand who and what your government has really become. I figure given the state of the world and the planet, you need to understand what the tyrants and usurpers have done. Now, before you run off screaming tinfoil hat, let me give you some background about me. I'm an old Southern boy, now 62. Born and raised in the South. I was raised to be an honest Southern Presbyterian gentleman. I was ethnically colorblind before the age of 10. Basically raised by blacks in my childhood town of Tryon, North Carolina. In my childhood, both of my parents worked. I stayed home with Annie Lipscomb of Greer, South Carolina. She referred to my mother as her white sister. We had a seasonal neighbor, Mrs. Turk. She came up from Florida. Had a Miss Daisy chauffeur and gardener named Homer. Homer spent a lot of time with me outdoors. Taught me to dig worms for fishing. My parents ran Tryon and Missildine pharmacies and had delivery drivers Rastus and Haywood. They drove me to kindergarten, brought my lunch to school, and otherwise drove us kids around the mountains for whatever our parents needed. Haywood used to let me sit in his lap and steer the old VW with the pharmacy mortar and pedestal on top as we drove to kindergarten. My mother and her 3 children, 6, 10, and 14, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina after my parents divorced. She moved to the big city, hoping there she'd be able to provide for her 3 children. I went to most of the Ivy League schools in Charlotte, thanks to my mother, where I experienced racial riots, was bussed across town for segregation in the 60s and 70s, was sent home because of Black Panther protests. My mother worked 3 jobs, so I learned to cook to help her out. And if something like the lawnmower needed repair, I learned how. I loved keeping things going, always curious, taking things apart and putting them back together to see how they work. I spent 10 years working my way through college, a year at Western Carolina, but I completed my degree, my Bachelor of Science in Accounting at UNC Charlotte in 1987. I was not a typical student. I worked commercial fishing in Alaska during my college years, doing school 1 semester a year. I did all kinds of odd jobs, mostly in construction work, from framing, finished curtain, insulation to electrical. Some plumbing, but not fishing or in school. I didn't fill my college electives like most college students, choosing instead to take courses like geology, biology, chemistry, psychology, finance, and computer sciences. I began work after completing my degree with NCNB in 1987 as an accountant on the bank's general ledger, subsidiary, community development, and other various accounting operations. I was chosen as general ledger operations manager to review and verify system conversions, implementations, consolidations, and ledgers during mergers and acquisitions. I worked in finance for years with the programmers designing, developing, testing, and implementing balancing, analysis, and verification reporting. I was later trained as a programmer in COBOL, EasyTreeve, SQL, DD2, Teradata, Unix, JCL, change management, and a host of other programming softwares. I became senior technical lead on General Ledger and system-to-system conversions for B of A. Managed a team through dozens of acquisitions, model bank platform conversions, handling some of the company's largest, most complicated ever bank mergers at the General Ledger level. I've been an analyst, problem solver my whole life. Finance technology, manager of programming most of my career with B of A. I traded securities most of my life, worked with every product imaginable at Bank of America. I followed markets closely daily and since my late teens. My work history, much of my Bank of America recognition, can be found on the About Me page of my website, brsinv.com. In 2004, I was well on my way to banking my second million. I personally built my family home from the ground up when I had a run-in with a corporate executive who wanted me to put a shine on and call it a Six Sigma project to appease Ken Lewis. Well, I had little respect for either of these men. This executive was an old boy network creative accountant. I left the bank in a slew of corporate behaviors I found unethical and wasn't about to destroy my career history, trying to put shine on garbage. This made me an enemy of the executive suite. Accurate analysis, logic, problem solving, planning, scheduling, and balancing massive conversions to the penny were skill sets fundamental to my career success at Bank of America. Based on my career history of problem solving, analysis, and logic applications, I believe you should hear what my 10 years of analysis on your government revealed. From 2004 to 2012 is a long story that forced me through USDA's administrative appeals process. The analyst in me wanted to understand their processes. I designed them before for B of A and written manuals in my days with the company. While reviewing the procedures of the USDA FSA across all levels of the operation, I discovered it's a complete fraud on participants, criminal and unconstitutional. It is, in effect, a federally funded protection racket for government agencies implemented by Bill Clinton and Al Gore. Later, I began further research on how the government had developed those procedures, which led me to significant court cases where the defendants had been railroaded for 10 years so government would avoid legal liabilities. There were more than 1 million bankrupted farmers railroaded and covered up with this racket. And I discovered evidence the design of the racket had been premeditatedly laid out in the farmers' federal court documents. These farmers' cases were used by Congress over a 10-year period in the federal courts to effectively turn the federal judiciary into a protection racket for the entire federal government and corporate deep state within. They didn't stop there. In the years following, they moved to enhance government's abilities to rob America. And that's why this is so important to me. It should be to you. Because, as can be found in this quote from Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence, when a long train of abuses and usurpations, keyword usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it's their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. I'm going to argue that all these usurpations add up to you're living in despotism whether you realize it or not. As I pointed out, the key word Jefferson used was usurpations, and I'll begin my constitutional lesson with this fundamental statement by King James in the 1600s. The king makes the laws the bounds of his power and the good of the public the end of his government. A tyrant makes the laws give way to his own will and appetite. King James' statement has family connections to me of historic significance, and I can now totally relate to the persecution my ancestors suffered during the French Wars of Religion. I point out my ancestors were medics for King James from the parish of St. Denis. They provided food, shelter, and medic services to his troops during the religious wars with the Roman Catholic Church. Huguenots, they were persecuted for their religious beliefs in Mala, or mother, as opposed to father. They battled through the religious wars of their time until their property was annexed by Louis XIV in 1673. They were forced with King William II of Orange's aid to flee France for survival in 1684 and sailed to America. I spent most of a decade on my own time and money studying the law, researching court cases, reading SCOTUS opinions, learning the federal rules of civil procedure, the federal rules of criminal evidence, the Department of Justice guides to RICO prosecutions. I continued those studies as I began pursuing the government in multiple federal courts, 3 different filings, one against the USDA, one against the federal government, and one against Wall Street, all pursuing USDA's criminal operations. Quick note, USDA FSA all but bankrupted me, having committed 14 felonies in the process. I have been completely denied a fair hearing. I found through all this what I believe exactly transpired in the collapse of American justice to oligarchy control of America's government, which is now no more than a criminal enterprise. My analysis revealed very disturbing facts that began with this statement by King James. I've come to regard his words as the most important statement in the last 400 years of human history. Remember, Louis XIV's monarchical rule ended with the French Revolution. It's highly inappropriate, unethical, inhumane in these times to allow this enterprise to continue to exist.